The rest of the story are Stop Being Stupid Part 16 by Anna von Reitz. Reading from annavonreitz.com. So, we covered the law of the sea, both maritime and admiralty, and you know now that maritime law is also called commercial law, Roman civil, or just civil law, maritime law, and law merchant. You know that admiralty is distinguished from maritime in that admiralty pertains to military and governmental affairs on the high seas, while maritime concerns itself with civilian transport of goods, services, and persons on the high seas and navigable inland waterways. This is the same difference as the difference between the U.S. Navy and the Merchant Marine Service. All these activities fall under the law of the sea, which is a very ancient venue of the law that first arose thousands of years ago and which was based on pagan religious beliefs and ethical principles. The most recent overhaul of maritime law, also known as Roman civil law, took place in the 2nd century BC. So know, Dorothy, when you step out into international jurisdiction, you are not in Kansas anymore, and the rules and standards of behavior and the guarantees you are owed on land no longer apply. Satan, aka Poseidon, was the original god of the sea, known as the father of all lies, so you can pretty much figure out what his law is like and can now understand why the federal rules of civil procedure demand an appearance of justice and not the actual thing. This foreign pagan satanic form of law governs worldwide shipping to this day, and its legal practices are often unlawful. Only corporations can form the maritime or admiralty agreements known as contracts, and only corporations can be held accountable for contracts. So how is it that you, a living man, are being held to account? It's largely because you have an account, and you have what is presumed to be a legal name and a signature written in cursive, as in curse of the sea. Normal, average landlubbers have no such things, so when a judge sees an account and a legal name like John M. Doe and receives paperwork that is signed, as in American Sign Language, in cursive writing, he has to assume that you are acting as a corporation operating the legal name John M. Doe, and that you have an account as a franchise of a federal corporation, a Federal Reserve Bank, and that you have entered into legal contracts, that is, maritime contracts of some kind, and that you are to be held accountable. Now, none of this is true. You have most likely never knowingly, willingly, nor under conditions of full disclosure entered into a maritime contract in your entire life, but the way the rats have set things up, you're automatically presumed to be operating in this venal foreign pagan system, and to be voluntarily subjecting yourself to the law of the sea, either admiralty or maritime. Actually, either maritime or admiralty as written. And you can scream and shout until the cows come home about your rights and guarantees owed to you on the land, but none of that counts at sea. You have been press-ganged, shanghaied, illegally transported, kidnapped. Your identity has been stolen along with your money and your credit cards. And the so-called beauty of the scheme is that nobody told you or your mother or anyone that had a legitimate interest in what was being done behind the scenes. The entire transport took place under color of law silently when you were only a few weeks old, and nobody was the wiser except the Bar Association crooks and the feckless politicians responsible for this outrage. Their excuse? Oh, well, it was all for the war effort. It's always a war effort in which you are called upon to defend them from their well-earned enemies and wind up fighting the people that are, at the very least, your natural allies. The perpetrators have given you the gift of a legal name and an account as a presumptive ward of their state. Wasn't that nice of them, to claim ownership of your name and steal your identity and misrepresent your political status so as to take you into the foreign jurisdiction of the sea and legally rob and rape you? So they press-ganged you into their service and claimed that you were a citizen and subject to the international law of the sea. And you let them do this to you because you were deliberately dumbed down, misinformed, and left as prey to these vile monsters when you were just a baby in your cradle. Well, as it turns out, your ancestors, quote, reserved all non-delegated powers in international jurisdiction to the states and the people, Article 10 of the actual Constitution. And since you were born as one of the people owed the land jurisdiction of this nation, you can kick the ever-loving bejesus out of these vermin using those reserved powers. For starters, you own and control the federal postal districts, which are land-based and which underlie and occupy the same space as the United States districts, only this is your international jurisdiction on the land as opposed to their international jurisdiction on the sea. You can now discern the difference between a federal marshal and a United States marshal. The men and women responsible for this criminal scheme and treason against you stopped hiring federal marshals a few years back because, after all, there are so few people left who are still claiming to be American state nationals, that is, knowledgeably claiming their birthright as Virginians, Californians, Coloradans, and so on, and because it doesn't suit their agenda against you to hire men and women to fill those peace officer slots, they've just neglected to fund them. But as the source of all money and credit on this planet, you can fund those positions. You can fill those positions with volunteers too. And you can actually serve as a federal marshal yourself if you have the time and the expertise and desire to make a difference in this situation and put an end to the crimes being carried out against Americans. You can assemble your jural assemblies at the county and state levels throughout this once great nation, and you can make it great again, to borrow a tagline from Donald Trump. You can start by recognizing the venal crimes that have been committed, and you can start by objecting to any claim that you are any form of citizen. Most of all, you can realize that the federal government is a foreign entity with respect to you and your states of the Union, and that it has committed crimes against you and your states under the guise of serving you. You can surrender your person. They created for you a few days after your birth, the legal name they substituted for your proper English name, and assign its assets to your benefit and to the benefit of your country. You don't have to act as a citizen of anything, and you don't have to live under the venal law of the sea. See this in over 700 articles on Anna's website at annavonreitz.com. Support her work by giving generously via PayPal, and you spell the website ANNAVONREITZ.com. Hypothecation, or Stop Being Stupid, Part 17, by Anna von Reitz, reading from annavonreitz.com. Hypothecation is a fancy word for fraud. It concerns a purely hypothetical debt owed by a pure hypothetical corporation. It allows a third party to claim that a corporation named after you and operating under your name is standing good for their debts. It allows them to take title to your body, land, home, marriage, children, and all else that you may have on earth and use it as collateral for their debts, all without telling you and having any valid agreement with you at all. Do you smell a great big fat stinking rat yet? Those who have been following along know that maritime law, also known as commercial law and Roman civil law and law merchant, is an ancient system of laws and codes that arose around 1,000 years ago and is based upon the worship of Satan, the father of all lies, and other pagan practices and beliefs. You also know that no living man can form a contract under this system of laws. Only corporations, that is, legal fiction entities, can form contracts, because contracts are themselves fraudulent by definition. Think about it. Can you guarantee your abilities or conditions 10 minutes from now, much less 30 years hence? No, of course not. As the prophet Jeremiah bemoaned, it is not given to us to be able to guarantee a single step. Can someone so limited in scope by nature ever enter into a contract guaranteeing anything, much less the fulfillment of a contractual obligation set far into the future, like the paying off of a mortgage 20 or 30 years from now, or a car loan in 5 years? The answer is no, no, no. The very best living man can do is what is called a good faith agreement, which is sometimes misrepresented as a contract, but is in fact no guarantee at all aside from one's good faith intention to carry through on whatever is agreed to. So you have fake entities, corporations, which exist only in the mind and as pieces of paper known as a charter, making promises that no man can guarantee for performance of contracts which everyone concerned knows are bogus by nature. In order to safeguard themselves against such obvious dishonesty and folly, the perpetrators of this system also claim to have a corporate veil to protect their own hides and fortunes from the consequences of their actions. And they also seek to privately insure their corporations against losses on top of it. The corporate veil is a claim based on the fact that a corporation by definition is a dead entity, and nobody can hold a dead man accountable except to the extent of his remainder estate. So what is a corporation's estate? Only the assets it holds in its name. Under normal circumstances, its shareholders cannot be sued for anything beyond the corporation's assets. So imagine that you borrow your neighbor's name, Curtis Alvin Foster, and you use his name to create a corporate person named Curtis Alvin Foster in all capital letters, and you operate it as a franchise of another corporation like the All Caps United States Incorporated. The United States Inc., operating as the parent corporation, issues bonds, that is, promises to pay in the future, and names good old Curtis Alvin Foster as the surety underwriting the bonds. People then buy these United States Treasury bonds in the rational belief that the United States Inc. and all the franchises belonging to the United States Inc. are standing good for the debts of the United States. Well, what happens when the United States declares bankruptcy? All that the United States has at risk are whatever bits and pieces it hasn't transferred to the ownership of other corporations like the government of the United States Inc. and the United States of America Inc. and E Pluribus Unum, the United States Inc. and the Department of Defense Inc. and so on and so on. And those bits and pieces of property scattered around the world are not sufficient to cover the debts of the United States Inc. But the actual shareholders in the United States Inc. are protected by the corporate veil. They have siphoned off all the profits and left nothing of value on the table. And worse comes to worse, they are prepared to seek bankruptcy protection, just like the big boys, the banks and the holding companies behind this whole fraud. So the debt is insurmountable, and the United States Inc. and its actual shareholders are all snug and protected behind the corporate veil, and also holding the option of bankruptcy protection for all the guilty parties, such as the members of the United States Congress, and who is left wiggling on the hook for this? Why, you and me and good old Curtis Alvin Foster are on the hook for it, of course. All those sureties, all the franchise corporations, and all their assets get plugged to pay back the investors who bought those United States Treasury bonds. In just this way, you and your assets have been used as collateral, as insurance underwriting. The promises to pay made by the United States Congress. In just this way, you and your assets have been used as collateral, as insurance underwriting. The promises to pay by the United States Congress that floated the United States Treasury bonds in the name of the United States and all those franchises named after you and me and Curtis Alvin Foster. What? I can hear you all saying, how is that possible? I never agreed to use my labor and my body and my home and my business as collateral, backing those spendthrifts in Congress. I didn't sign any such agreement. I don't know what you're talking about. It all goes back to the father of all lies and the system of law created in honor of him. What's the first lie? It happened before you were even aware of what was going on. Your mother innocently and unwittingly signed undisclosed paperwork allowing the vermin to presume that you were a citizen of the United States and a fatherless bastard that nobody claimed, and so their religious nonprofit service corporation, operating the public charitable trust, claimed you as a ward and dependent and set up a corporate franchise named after you. They issued a birth certificate under your name to keep it all legal but not lawful, and they listed you as an asset and franchise of their parent corporation, the United States, Inc. Look at what you think of as your own birth certificate. It is written on bond paper. It is signed by the registrar of the probate court in the county where you were born. Your estate on earth was probated when you were only a few weeks old. You'll notice that your actual birthday appears on the certificate, say June 6, 1956. But there's another date, too, a file date. That's the day these vermin secretly enrolled you as a franchise of their corporation and named you as a surety for their corporate debts. At that time, when you were only a few days old, the devil claimed you, killed you, and left nothing but your named estate as a record that you ever lived at all. You and your assets were also press-ganged into the international jurisdiction of the sea and made subject to maritime law, Satan's law. Since then, you have been ever increasingly indebted by the senseless spending of the Congress and the fake governors running a state of states such as State of California or the State of California in all caps, all of them making false claims against your name and estate and against your actual state, the California state, and all of them claiming that you and your state are franchises owned and operated by their corporation, and that you and all your land, etc., stands as surety for their debts and are fair game for any creditor that cares to make a claim. And of course, nobody hears a word of dissent from you claiming otherwise. Why? Because your mother was hoodwinked and coerced into signing an undisclosed information sheet about you, and just as innocently gave wrong information. In legalese, the word informant means that your mother, listed as the informant, was giving notice of a crime, the abandonment of a baby. Your mother never knew that she was never taught the legal, as opposed to common law use, meaning of words, U.S. citizen, and she never realized that she donated you into slavery. So of course she never took any corrective action. And when you came of age, you were totally uninformed, so you couldn't take any action either. What's the only deal you can't refuse? The one that you've never heard of in the first place. What appears to be a birth certificate acknowledging your arrival is in fact a death certificate announcing your civil death. Father of all lies, right? A death certificate disguised as a birth certificate. Nice. The men and women who approved and set up this fraud machine were the worst, most despicable kind of criminal imaginable. White-collar slave traders and inland pirates wearing nice suits, preying upon ignorant women and little babies in their cradles. They are all long since dead and beyond our ability to punish. Today their grandsons and granddaughters continue to operate the fraud machine, but that is all they have ever known. When you capture them and put the pieces together and ask them to account for their actions, 9 out of 10 of them appear truly amazed. They only saw a part of it, typically a small part of the total machine, and they claim they didn't know what was going on. Not at all. And it was just the way we do things. This is the way it's always been done, and within their living memory, that's true. By far the majority of the people who serve to create and implement and keep this evil system running are totally innocent and have no idea what they are contributing to, and no idea that they've also been victimized and claimed like unbranded cattle. If they knew, then all the government workers and the people of these 50 great nation states would rise up with one voice and say, fraud, fraud against us, fraud against our children, fraud, identity theft, false records, false claims in commerce. I am an American state national. Help, help, help. Okay, so that was lie number 1, false records and false testimony fabricated against you and then held against you without your knowledge or consent, stacking the deck against you and allowing false presumptions about you for the rest of your life. So then the rest of the lies came up, lies 2, 3, and 4, and on and on. You were told that you had to sign up for Social Security or you couldn't have a job. So under that coercion, you signed up. You were told that you had to have a driver's license, so you signed up. You were told you had to have a marriage license, so you did that too. And it so happens that absolutely none of this common knowledge was ever true for 90% of you. It's actually just disinformation put out by self-interested parties and ignorance parroted by people who thought they knew the truth and didn't. Each one of these voluntary contracts is not really voluntary. They are not actually required for American state nationals, and the consequences of signing these documents are never disclosed. You are penalized and hounded and coerced under various kinds of duress to have a Social Security number and a driver's license and a marriage license and all the rest of it. And there is a reason for this. Each one of these things seems to further lend credence to the storyline these vermin are peddling about you, that you wanted to be classed as a ward of the state, that you voluntarily gave up your birthright as an American state national, that you are subject to the law of the sea, not the law of the land, and so on and on. And again, if people would stop talking about what they think they know and stop making assumptions and start asking questions, all of this would become very apparent. You would all realize that you have been defrauded and you would start seeking remedy for it. But the fact that a license is official permission from some authority presumed to be greater than you to do something that would otherwise be illegal. You should all be asking, when did it become illegal to get married? Who says? Why? Remember what I said about the sanctimonious monsters claiming that you were an abandoned, unwanted, fatherless child and that their religious, non-profit, public charitable trust adopted you? The Public Charitable Trust was set up as a welfare fund for displaced plantation slaves in the wake of the so-called Civil War. So who is eligible to receive help from the PCT? Abandoned babies and unemployed Negroes and other federal wards and dependents who receive welfare benefits from the fund, all of which they pay for themselves, of course. Likewise, the marriage license was imposed on Negroes, and only upon Negroes who were deemed citizens of the United States. The fear was that displaced plantation slaves would breed like rabbits and become a public nuisance, so laws were passed requiring Negro men to prove they had jobs and income sufficient to support a wife and family before they got married, and thus the requirement of the marriage license was imposed on all those receiving benefits from the Public Charitable Trust. Are you a citizen of the United States? Are you desiring benefits from a public charitable trust set up for the welfare relief of African Americans? Are you required to have a license to get married? Who dreams up this outrageous crapola? Not me. I'm just describing it for you and noting the history involved. Clearly, Satan is all about lies and half-truths and purposeful omissions, and his system of law is too. And through no fault of your own, you have been commandeered into this system of lies, fraud, racketeering, coercion, and crime. You've been made subject to it and arbitrarily defined as both a criminal and a slave. You've been made to dig your own grave, and all this in your own country, using your own resources against you. And this has been done to you by your own employees, your supposed allies, and trustees. The men and women who did this 150 years ago deserve to be strung up and gibbeted for what they were, British pirates. Those who have knowingly and deliberately continued it, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Sir Winston Churchill, deserve no better from the American people. And those who continue these practices once they have been fully and freely informed are also criminals in the modern day. A crime is a crime is a crime is a crime. In this entire matter, first to last, from the outrages of the so-called Civil War onward, the British monarch has acted in gross breach of trust, and so have the popes from that day to this. The British Crown Corporation and its subsidiaries, including the Northern Trust Corporation, the Government of the United States, Inc., their subsidiaries and franchises, including FBI, BLM, American Bar Association, and the Internal Revenue Service, have all functioned as international crime syndicates on our shores. Just over a year ago, an innocent, and by my standards young, rancher named Lavoy Finicum was deliberately ambushed and murdered by members of the FBI, which is nothing but an armed mercenary security company operated by a for-profit corporation calling itself the Government of the United States Incorporated, in all caps. They acted under color of law and murdered an innocent American on his way to a public meeting. And the vicious miscreants, murderers with malice aforethought, have to all appearances gotten away with it. The British Bar Association members operating as district attorneys have failed to serve justice and have instead defended crime against the people of this country in violation of the 1947 Bar Association Treaty. And it isn't the first time. The American Bar Association, which claims to be a professional association organized to promote continuing education and high professional and ethical standards among its members, stands revealed on this matter and occasion as nothing more than a rubber stamp for the brutal criminal regime in London, which is ultimately responsible for their existence. It's a good thing that I'm not into politics and I'm not Donald Trump. If I were, every single one of these federal corporations would be liquidated, not just sold, liquidated for cause. Every single one of the men responsible for the miscarriage of justice in this country would be ferreted out and fired. The corrupt judges and district attorneys would be no more. Fired, and not eligible for pensions or rehire ever. The members of the Bar Association would be given a choice: either renounce membership in the bar or have all your worldly goods confiscated and be deported to England or any other country stupid enough to put up with the bar's doublespeak criminality. The federal state-of-state franchises would be liquidated also, and all their ill-gotten gains, including the overstuffed employee pension and CAFR accounts, returned to the actual land jurisdiction state governments we are owed. I would do a department by department and agency by agency overhaul and send forth an army of accountants to scour through the financial records of every single one of these organizations. And I would bring suit against every corporation suspected of the crimes of racketeering, coercion, extortion, falsification of vital records, unlawful coercion, and conspiracy to defraud, and other outrages against the actual states and people. I would not only have their corporate veil pierced, but thrown away and trampled on. I would dispatch a special counselor to every United States district with strict orders to clean up this administrative nightmare and fire as many people as necessary to get it done, and I would dispatch a team of special prosecutors to the United Nations to bring formal complaints against Britain and France and the Netherlands and Switzerland and the rest of the false friends who have preyed so relentlessly on the American states and people. I would send another group of special prosecutors to France to present the proof of criminal wrongdoing in the International Court of Criminal Justice and demand a full-scale investigation, and I would make sure that the full allegations and all the evidence was placed squarely on the public record for all to see. No more backdoor deals and gentlemen's agreements, just a house cleaning, like we haven't seen since great-grandma was a pup. And now, finally, about hypothecation. It's a process of hypothetical debt. A corporation alleges that Curtis Alvin Foster is its surety in case it can't or won't pay its debts. Another corporation brings forward a debt for Curtis Alvin Foster to pay. They bring suit against Curtis Alvin Foster, a corporate franchise of the United States. So far, all of this is nothing but lies and theories, so the court goes fishing. They send a summons and notices to the name of Curtis Alvin Foster, and of course, poor old Curtis Alvin Foster, who doesn't know that any of this is going on, answers it. Snap. And suddenly it appears that a corporation operating as a franchise of the United States Incorporated under the name Curtis Alvin Foster exists. Someone stepped forward and accepted the name. So under the doctrine of merger and the presumptions already existing as a result of the deliberately concocted vital statistics records, the court logs another victim. You see, Curtis Alvin Foster, in all caps, is already defined as a criminal, enslaved, and guilty party. No matter what poor old Curtis Alvin Foster says in his defense, no matter what law or what evidence he produces, the court cannot hear him. It can only give, as its own current rules state, an appearance of justice, while the criminals in robes proceed to pillage the account they hold in the name of Curtis Alvin Foster and charge his supposedly abandoned birth estate. These courts have got to be shut down permanently. Those administering them must be fired and removed. The judges who have known about this system and who have participated in it must be fired and removed. The district attorneys who have stood by and let this go on have to be fired and removed. No more hypothecation of debt related to any implied contract should be allowed ever, and no political status should be presumed upon anyone on the basis of vital statistics records, informants, or imposed by any so-called public policy. Every single attorney and bureaucrat found guilty of supporting and colluding in this gigantic fraud should be branded as a public malefactor and pariah and deported permanently from our shores. The bar associations which have promoted this criminal activity should be outlawed, and anyone having a bar card or license to practice law should be given a choice: either tear up your bar card and operate in the honest court system owed to the people of these 50 nation states, or get out. Those that remain loyal to the bar after learning the facts should be stripped of their right to be here and put to sea in a leaky boat, so far as I'm concerned. I believe that it was the intention of our forefathers when they passed the Titles of Nobility Amendment, and I believe that they were correct in their assessment of the situation. I believe that hundreds of millions of people have died and have lived miserable, truncated lives because of the criminality and dishonesty of legal professionals and the continued use and abuse of the Roman civil law in modern times. I call upon every member of the American Armed Forces, every sheriff, every marshal, every peace officer, traffic cop, special agent, provost marshal, law enforcement official, corporate officer, bureaucrat, politician, and rank-and-file American to demand an end to the use of so-called executive, martial common law, and Roman civil law on American shores. Demand the correction of all the falsified and undisclosed vital statistics records that have been deliberately and self-interestedly created for the purpose of press-ganging and defrauding and mischaracterizing the innocent American people. Demand prosecution of those who have practiced both personage and barratry against us. Demand restitution from England, France, and the other false friends that have contributed to this identity theft, fraud, and enslavement. Expose the rot and clean it out like a pus-filled wound. Let us put an end to Satan's law once and for all and embrace a new era and a new international law. Toward this end, people, discuss what I am telling you here with your families and your friends. Take this article and any others that you find helpful and give them to the elected bureaucrats, to the police, to the lawyers themselves, many of whom have been blissfully ignorant of the Bar Association's true nature and misdeeds, to the local county sheriff and the school officials and the pastors and the priests who serve your communities. Let everyone know what has gone on here, what has been alleged and practiced against them. Then start the process of declaring your actual political status as a non-citizen American state national and get it on the record. Start assembling your county jural assemblies. Post your public notices. Hold your elections for your county sheriff for the land-based county. Tell the current private office holder that he is welcome to be the land sheriff too, if he agrees to uphold the actual public and organic law owed to your county, and if not, he is occupying a private office in a corporation like any other corporation. He is required to recognize the man who does hold the public office as a result of the General Assembly election. Elect your justices of the peace, often mistakenly called judges. Elect your court clerk, bailiff, grand jury administrator, and all other public offices of the county you are owed. Put together your jury pools. When you have your jury assembly up and running, create your jural society to operate the federal postal district courts that are owed to your counties. These courts preside over matters arising in the undelegated portion of the international jurisdiction reserved by the states and the people under Article 10 of the actual Constitution. Anything and everything that was not specifically and explicitly delegated to the federal corporation to do remains the province of the states and the people, and the federal postal district courts are the proper venue. Get going, America. Get up on your feet. Raise the alarm. Take the necessary steps to reclaim your birthright estates, operate the government you are owed, and reform the operations of the federal government on our shores. A great deal of work has to be done on all sides to bring this criminality to an end and forge forward for a new future, and nobody else in the world can do it for you. See this and over 700 others on Anna's website, AnnaVonReitz.com. To support this work, look for the PayPal button on this website. Her name is spelled ANNAVONREITZ.com.